Today on the Righteous Savages podcast, we're going to talk about fatherhood. What is important about godly fatherhood? What is important to counter the culture of anti-fatherhood? And why we should be following Christ as fathers leading our families. So come along and join us. Well, it's been a minute. Just life getting in the way.
Yeah, not that we haven't been busy, but
no.
So
Yep.
finally back in the new and improved. The studio probably looks the same to everybody else.
Yeah, it's a lot of background upgrades. We upgraded our computer. We upgraded kind of the layout of the studio so we can do some solo stuff. And you guys have probably seen that stuff popping out on YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah,
and
thanks to all of our new sponsors, Jon Wheaton and Dave Kemp.
Yes, those guys, I mean, they got some deep pockets.
Yeah, so if anybody else wants to be a sponsor,
buy our merch. I just realized I'm not wearing our merch today.
You
Except for the hats.
yes.
Buy our merch. Support us. Yep, we're shameless plugging for all of that stuff. We also got some trainings coming up, and we hope you guys will hit those up. They're actually on the Tombstone Gun Range website. We got one at the end of February. Hope you guys will jump in. We got a pistol class. We got some rifle classes coming up, and we're really, really excited to roll out the Righteous Savages gun training and tactical training stuff. So, and that'll be led by myself and Mr. Dave Kemp.
World famous.
All right, so we get into our main topic here. I think that this is one that's kind of long overdue because we've touched on it in a couple of episodes, but we never really hit it right on the head, and that's fatherhood. Both of us being dads, you of grown children and having grandchildren, and me of kind of, well, I'm about a decade behind you, I guess I could say. So, but it's an interesting journey.
Just a young buck.
A young buck.
We talk about our faith a lot and what that means to us. We've done some episodes on masculinity and what that means. And it really all drives towards the tip of the spear, which is being that good, manly, fatherly role model to not only just to our kids, our wives as well and the rest of our family, but it really drives, I think, the place where we can probably, if you're honest, make one of the biggest impacts is with our children, because they're the ones who are on deck. Your relationship with your spouse is very important. Because we want to live healthy, happy lives with our wives and husbands, but who's going to come up behind us? It's going to be our kids, and so the fatherly role for us, especially these days in America, is critical, and we have got to get this right. And I'm here to tell you, it just won't happen all by itself. You can't just hope that things work out and just rely on the system, the school system. Other, kids that your kids are hanging around with. You can't just rely on things just hoping to be okay. You've got to take the lead, and we're going to try and talk about some of that tonight. Yep,
for sure. I think that really where we begin is to base it where the Bible begins, and that is that when God set up the family, He set up a male headship. He set up a male-led hierarchy, basically. And that's what makes fatherhood so important, is because if you don't have good leadership, the whole thing's going to fail. If you don't have that tip of the spear actually penetrating through all of the junk, you're actually going to end up falling short. And I think that really the most important thing where we are in culture, where we are in even the church, is that we are not equipping men, and we're not inspiring men to be those godly leaders. We're not inspiring men to be those godly fathers, to be that example. One of the guys I follow, and you've probably seen him before, Nick Freitas is his name, and he talks about how
Fritos, I call him.
Fritos. Hey, Nick, if you watch our episode, no offense, I know you're an Army Green Beret or whatever, so don't kick my butt. Yeah. No, but I think that what he said is really, it's very similar to what you said. We're training our replacements, especially when it comes to sons. We are training our replacements. And I think as a father, we are supposed to be the example of what a godly man and what a godly leader for our sons, for sure. We're training our sons how to be godly men and godly leaders, and we're teaching our daughters what kind of men to look for in a mate. And I think that is super important.
That's big shoes to fill. We're not just saying just because you are a Christian or just because for a lot of other reasons that somehow that makes you better than somebody else. It doesn't. There's got to be worked at. It's got to be one of those things where, and we go back to the foundation here is, I think what Nick was talking about in that episode, I saw some of that was the nuclear family is important. And if you're really, truly honest, that's the best way to set up a family for success is a mom and a dad, and there being a faith-based culture there. And it's not to say that a single mom can't be successful in raising kids. There's a lot of kids that go through tougher times and come out shining, like a diamond, and they've made it. So it is possible to do that. But if we're honest, the best way, if we're going to set ourselves up for success, to have the best family humanly possible and have the best chances for kids to grow up to be successful, it's in that nuclear, that traditional family. It is.
Yeah, and there's actually a ton of scientific and social science to back that up. They've done study after study after study that shows when a child is raised in a nuclear family with a mother and a father who are actively involved, they are way more successful at life. Now, like you said, there are examples of success. I would think of Ben Carson would be a great example. He was raised by a single mom, one of the most world-renowned brain surgeons ever, and created brain surgery to take apart conjoined twins, and did all kinds of amazing things. Ended up running for president. So it's not saying that you can't have success there. It's just we're talking about really what God designed and what is best for society, what is best for culture, and what is best for children. As fathers, we should be leading, and we should be trying to keep that nuclear family together.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's okay to say that that's probably the best way. We don't have to succumb to the pressure of society to say, well, every life situation is just as good as any other one. It's not just as good. It's not. And everybody knows that's dishonest to say that. So let's just step up to the plate. We need to have standards, and we need to try to, whatever the gold standard is for being a father, a good spouse, all that. What's the situation to set me up to be as successful as possible? Let's just say that's what it is. It's the nuclear family, and it's okay. It's okay to say that.
Yep, absolutely. I think that one of the ways that we get caught up in the cultural trap, one of the cultural traps is the way that they judge manhood, the way they judge fatherhood and masculinity overall is, and I'm stealing this from Vodi Bakum, who's a preacher. I watch a lot of his stuff. Great guy to listen to. He talks about culture judges men by the ball field, the bedroom, and the billfold. 3 Bs. And really, when you think about it, we put so much honor into people that are great at sports. I know I've been a big fan of sports most of my life. We put so much honor, and we think of those as real men. Or men that are, in the bedroom. How do you perform in the bedroom? That kind of thing. That's a cultural thing that we put on people. Or the billfold. How much money do you make? How successful are you? We look at people who probably are not really good godly examples in culture that have made a lot of money. I mean, Elon Musk would be a great example, or Donald Trump, or any of those people that made a lot of money. They may not be the best example or illustration of what we should be following in
and
culture.
It's easy to see that quick, like, ooh, this guy makes $1 billion a year, and it's easy to look at that on the surface real quick and be like, man, that's success, or that guy's doing really well. But it's funny whenever you hear stories about celebrities or very wealthy people having problems with their families or their kids, people are very quick to realize and almost feel like, ooh, I feel sorry for that guy. He's got all the money, he's got all the resources in the world, and they're having all of these issues, or his kids don't respect him. And once you realize that the true status of the fatherhood is or the relationship status between him and his wife, once you realize that's not good, all that other fluff, the money, all that stuff, then it doesn't mean anything anymore. And then eventually people, if they think about it for a while, they put the true stock in how successful your family is. So it sometimes takes a minute for that to sink in. And on the surface, I think you're right, where that's what people look for. But I think anybody that's honest about it would say, you know what, I really do respect completely the people that have been married for 50 years, or their kids grew up to do X, Y, and Z, or their kids call their mom every day, or the things that are really important. I think ultimately people really put stock in that more than anything else.
Yep. And if you wanted a good example recently of a family that's a celebrity family that's kind of in shambles, I would think of the Smith family, Will Smith, Jada Pinkett Smith. Yeah. You look at all of the drama and the just insanity of like the trash of that family being drug out into the headlines and the tabloids. It's almost to a point where it's just like, hey, take us out of the group chat, dude. Like we don't want to be involved in all this stuff. But the reality is there's a lot of families out there that have a mess, and we should look at the character of the people. And like you said, that longevity. Are they staying together? Do their kids respect them and honor them? Because I think that's a great example of what it means to raise children in a godly way.
Yeah, you can't say enough about leading by example. Mm-hmm. And if the example is, well, you know what, kids? You can have as many girlfriends or boyfriends as you want, because me and mommy, that's what we do. Mm-hmm. That's not going to work out for very long.
Yeah.
You can think it's going to, and you can think that you can just love as many people as you want, and it's not really love, and just do what everybody in Hollywood is doing, and it's not setting an example. You've got to set standards for your kids, rules, boundaries, and it's not because you're a jerk or you're just trying to be mean. It's because you're setting the guardrails and setting them up for success, because 5, 10, 15, 20-year-old kids, they're not able to make the best decisions. Just remember back to your high school days of all the wonderful decisions you've made. There's probably not a whole lot on that list.
Nope.
And thank goodness, hopefully somebody was there to corral you in, to be like, you know what, you got a curfew at a certain time, or you can't go hang out with these certain friends. And those things that as a kid you think, my parents just don't get me. They don't understand. Well, they understand so much more than you. I remember telling my kids every once in a while we'd have an issue come up. Somebody's getting in trouble, and one of the things I'd tell them is like, listen, I've lived your life. I've done all this stuff, and I'm way ahead in the future of where you are. But it's the same road. We're both traveled the exact same road. We've all done the same things, except I'm 20 years ahead of you. Yeah. And I know what's coming around the next curve. So take that advice, take, the information I'm about to give you, because I'm seeing into your future. Yeah. I mean, kids, it's very hard for them. It's like, no way, my parents don't understand what's going on. But I tried to portray to them, like, listen, this is for your protection, you're good. Kids don't want to hear that type of stuff, but that's the whole point of having standards, rules, and guidelines, is because you love your kids, not because you hate them, you want to be a jerk, you want to be controlling. And I know there's a lot of super, super controlling, parents out there, parents that just never take their eyes off of their kids. So there's an extreme on that way
absolutely.
As well. But I think if you're reasonable about it, that's part of the job is having standards and you start by leading by example so that kids can see it firsthand.
Yep, absolutely. Do you ever, I know I do this all the time, do you ever look at one of your kids and be like, gosh, that's me? Oh my gosh, all the time. Especially with my 11-year-old. There's times where I'm just like, man, that's me at that. He's this. I'm trying to teach him because it's taken me decades to learn.
Here's what's really scary. My thoughts are usually, I did so much more worse stuff than my kid.
Yeah, well,
that's the scary part. Like, I wonder if they ever did this thing. I'm like, I don't know. I'm sure there's a ton of stuff.
Yep,
we don't know about. But
I sit there and I told my wife the other day, I was like, man, I've got to cure him from trying to be a people pleaser, because I grew up just wanting to please everybody. I wanted to be buddies with everybody, not realizing that it's not really a healthy thing to be. It's trying to be a people pleaser, trying to make everybody your buddy. It took me a while to get over that, and it's like I see all of that, so I'm like hyper focused on it. It's like, hey, buddy, don't worry about this. We just had an issue at school a couple of days ago where it's like, hey, buddy, you don't have to please everybody. You don't have to try and fit in. It's fine for you to say no or to and it's just that reminder of like, man, I learned so many lessons the hard way, and I learned so many things just by ignoring what my parents, who knew what they were talking about at the time. The older I get, the more I'm like, man, Dad knew what he was talking about, you know?
And it's a balance, too. Remember, there's a scene from the movie Sandlot where the kid moves to the new town, doesn't know anybody, and has been sitting around the house all day long doing nothing, and his mom is like, listen, go out, meet some friends, whatever. And she says, get in trouble, for crying out loud. Like, you know, not too much, though. Not too much trouble, but, get out there and experience life to some extent, and that's where you learn. That's where you learn from your mistakes. And so you have to allow your kids to make mistakes. You can't, take your kid's car to the mechanic and say, put a governor on this car so it will only go the speed limit wherever they go. They're not, I understand where, you want to protect your kids, but they've got to have some level of free will where they can make their own decisions. Yeah. And once they make good decisions, even though, there's the ability to make wrong ones, that's when they start to feel rewarded. Like, I am doing the right thing. I am making the right decisions, if they have room to make some of those mistakes on their own.
Yep, absolutely. So as fathers, I think it's important to kind of set a precedent of like what we should be teaching our kids and what we should be examples of. And we get that straight from the Bible too. What is the first thing that God says to Adam when he puts him in the garden? Subdue the earth, work, labor, and that is something that I think that is lost in culture, in the church, is teaching men that it's okay to work hard. And we should be examples that aren't lazy in front of our kids, that show our kids a good example of what it means to be hardworking, because working is actually something that's biblical. Laboring is something that's biblical. And actually, when you look at the things that are cursed, slothfulness, laziness is actually things that God curses. So as fathers, we should be examples of men who are willing to go out, do the hard work, not take shortcuts, and set that example for our sons and our daughters to be, industrious and studious people.
Yeah, I think so. We set the example ourselves. I would also highly encourage, and this might be going to some controversy here, all right? I would highly encourage your kids to have a job in high school. Now, a lot of parents are like, well, I want my kids to get really good grades in high school. So I don't want them having a job. I don't want them to worry about that. I would rather them focus on school. And there's a lot of kids that do that. They turn out great. You're missing an opportunity to start building resilience at an early age in your kids. And it is critical. It is crucial. If you want them to be really successful when they, so they're not going to have a job in high school. They might not have a job in college either, because they're just focused on school. And then they get a real job and things are hard. They wake up one day, they feel like crap, and they have zero sick time. Like, are you going to go to work, or you're going to call in sick? I work with so many people now that they've been working at a job for 15 years. They have 0 hours of sick time. None. I retired with 1,200 hours of sick time after working a job for 25 years.
Some would call that a lot.
It's a little bit. It's a little bit. And I was so glad, so a little backstory about me. I've got 3 sons. They're all grown now. My oldest son is 28. My middle son is just turned 27 today. Happy birthday, Shane. Groundhog Day. Easy to remember that birthday. And my youngest
lives
son,
in my neighborhood, by the way.
Yeah, right on the corner. He saw you today, I think.
Yep.
The youngest son, Aaron, he's 21, and all of them have started working at a They weren't working, in sixth grade or anything, but pretty much in high school they were all working. A couple of my kids were helping my father-in-law with doing roofing. You want to talk about a hard job? How about get up at 5 a.m, get your lunch ready, put it in a lunch box, and go tear off roofs for 6-7 hours in
100-degree weather in the summer.
That's a hard job for a junior in high school.
Yep.
It's a hard job if you have a job as a waiter in a restaurant. Public service. You want to start building some resilience, be a waiter for a while.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and those things are good. Anytime we look back at things we did that were difficult and we made it through it, we're all proud of it. Whether it's like your service in the military was boot camp and just all of the military life, it's not easy. And you make it through that and you're a better person for it. So I would highly encourage parents to think seriously about having their kids work some type of job. It doesn't mean they got to work 40 hours a week, but have something that they're responsible for, that they can work hard at and be proud of at the end of the day. And it's just going to help them in college. It's going to help them in real life. And those are some things I think we need to try to push our kids to do, encourage them to have a job. There's a lot of kids, my wife, her family owned a little restaurant in Carterville for years. And my wife would get up at 5 in high school, 5 a.m., go to the restaurant, help her mom and dad get, restaurant stuff going, and then go to school. Yep. Those things make you a better person. So don't discourage your kids from doing some work in high school.
Yep. I started working, backstory for me. I started working when I was 15 years old. I started detailing cars in the middle of the summer started working with my youth pastor at the time. And hot summers, working out, washing cars inside and out. It was hard work. And then I got a job working for my dad, worked up until I basically got out of high school and got a job. And I haven't stopped working since then, And I would say probably the hardest was when I was going to college. I was still drawing my Air Force benefits, so I really didn't even have to go to school because getting the GI Bill and all that stuff while going to college. But I was actually working unload at UPS at 4 a.m. every morning. Mm-hmm. And then I'd work in the tire shop at Sam's after school. And so very heavy manual labor and hot and cold and all of that stuff. And honestly, I was crazy busy and dating my wife at the time. And that was probably where I felt all the time very fulfilled because I was on the go, but I was doing stuff that I felt it was just something good about having your hands dirty, about getting your hands dirty, about doing stuff manually that just makes you feel more fulfilled.
That sense of accomplishment. I'm wired that way. Yep. I'm wired to do projects. I'm wired to start something and build it and finish it and then stand back and be like, man, that I like accomplishing that. I remember having a job in high school one summer, late summer, Southern Illinois, hot, and we were stacking straw bales in a barn for a local farmer guy. Tim Smith was one of my buddies' brother-in-laws, and like, hey, we'll pay you, this is the mid-'80s, and we'll pay you $5 an hour. I thought, $5 an hour? That's, minimum wage was like $2.75 or something. I'm like, heck yeah, sign me up. No clue what I was getting into. Just like, we'll just go stack some stuff. We'll come into this barn where it was 98 outside, and here it's about 108, and we're stacking, straw bales, 20 high, and we were in there all day long. And I remember we made like $25 or something. And me and my buddy, we drove straight to Hardee's. We were just covered, just dust. We looked like we were working at a tire factory or something. And we go slinging into Hardee's in Carbondale. And I ordered like 2, giant, double quarter pounder style cheese. I was, it wore me out, but it was one of those things like later on, like you're proud of the fact and you're telling your buddies like, you won't believe, the hard thing we did. Like, and it was a thing you could kind of put your shoulders back and hold your chin up and be like, you were proud to have done that hard work. Yep,
absolutely. I remember baling hay for or doing straw bales for my uncle. And that's one of those jobs where you're like, I'll show up in short and a t-shirt, and you'll do that once. And then the next time you'll be wearing the longest jeans you can, the longest sleeve shirts, because you'll get scratched from hand to hand on your arms.
Can you imagine what the farmers were thinking when we showed up to do jobs? Like, they must have just been laughing out loud. Like, look at these idiot high school kids. Like, this is, if they would have had video cameras then, we'd have been all over the internet. Like, look at these goofballs.
Yep. I think that, that's the first thing that we should teach our kids. The other one is, teaching our sons how to love, because that's a really important thing. I think that it's something that doesn't always come naturally for men. Definitely comes naturally for women, but having that ability to love, to be the warrior and the poet, to borrow Mr. Lovell's moniker, but to teach our sons what it means to be loving for our wives, what it means to be honoring to our wives and honoring to their mother. And I think that is something that's also important. It's also important for a father to teach his daughters, what love should look like. That it's not all about the physical, but it is about the honor and the respect and the being there for the person emotionally and not just getting what you want. So I think that's very, very
that's
important.
a 100% leading by example type of thing. Your kids are going to watch how you talk to your wife. They're going to listen and, what's your tone of voice? What are the things you say to her? How do you, and they'll be around, if you have kids around your house long enough, they're going to see you and your wife not agree on things, and they're going to watch how you handle that. And they're watching very closely, and they're soaking that stuff in every day for years and years and years. So it's not like you have to have a sit down discussion with your kids every night. You lead by example. They're learning by watching you. So that's the number one thing for teaching your kids how to love. But then directly when it comes with your kids, being involved with them, telling them that you love them, hugging them as much as possible, saying you love them when you're getting off the phone, and those type of things, and just being aware, being present, being interested.
Yeah.
Kids, when they come home, like, hey, mom and dad, look at this paper I got, like, get interested and be proud of them and say that you're proud. And kids are they're sponges. They need that attention. They need eye contact. They need physical touch. They need hugs and pats on the back. And as a parent, as a father, you should want to do those things. I mean, there's nothing on the planet you love more than your kids. And you can't, you need to really honestly evaluate. Am I taking my kids for granted? Is it just they're always around and, we'll do the lovey-dovey stuff, on their birthday or at Christmas, or, it shouldn't just be once or twice a year. And just ask the parents that have lost a kid in a car wreck or to some health, to some horrible thing. Ask them if they could rewind their lives and start all over. Hey, ma'am, would you do anything different in your relationship with your kids if you had a second chance? As a no-brainer. Everybody says, don't miss the opportunity, to say you love your kids or to go to this thing or go to their ball game. When it comes to, sports, and, you need to be there. You need to be, if your kid's going to be playing sports a lot, then you should probably be there to support them. Back in our day of, playing Little League baseball in the 70s and 80s, we were all like on our own. Yeah. I can remember in second grade, so I was 7 years old, being on one of my first, we started Little League earlier than that, but I can remember being 7 and getting on a bicycle and pedaling 2 miles to the school, to go play baseball. No, there wasn't parents taking us to every game. They weren't sitting in the bleachers, cheering on every game. Yep. I mean, they were there every once in a while, but there was no drop-off lines at school. There wasn't parents, we spent all of our time, alone, and doing a lot of that stuff. And it's like, so you need some support, but you don't need too much, and the whole sports thing with kids and parents these days is probably a whole nother topic for discussion.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what a different time. I grew up in the mid to late '80s, and it was the same thing, man. I rode my bike all over town. I can't even. First of all, my wife would not allow our kids to be out off of our street nowadays, and I mean it's probably for good reason. I think the world has gotten a little bit crazier, and but I tell you what, it's crazy to think about the time when you just ride your bike all day and you show up for meal times, and that was about it. And your parents just like be home by dark. That was my life, and but I do think that it's important for parents. It's like my oldest son Logan. He's on 3 basketball teams, so a travel team and then a couple of local teams. But and it's a lot right now. I think he's got like 4 games this weekend. So it's trying to get to those, but I always try and make sure that I make the majority of them. I may miss one here or there, but it's important for him to see me there, having his back, and teaching him. And one thing I think that's important for fathers is to be honest with their children. I see so many people sugarcoating things that don't really need to be sugarcoated with their children. And kids kind of know a lot of this stuff, but you can give a kid a false sense of arrogance or accomplishment when it's not there. I think there is a balance between that. I don't think that you should be super hard on them and tell them, oh no, you suck. But I also don't think that you'd be like, oh, you're a great singer and you can't carry a tune in the bucket. It's one of those things. I think that kids understand and they appreciate when you're honest with them.
If you want to take a deep dive into parenting, try being a coach for your own kids, some other kids. Try to do some coaching in your life. And I had 3 boys growing up. They all played Little League baseball, and I coached all of their Little League baseball teams. So I've done probably 12 years of Little League baseball coaching. And man, I tell you what, that was an eye opener. Not so much the kids. I mean, the kids are going to have fun and they're out there having a good time, but the parents, good grief. Talk about, you were just mentioning about some of the parents being extra hard. I can remember specifically, and it wasn't just one, this happened a lot. You'd always have one parent that was always on their kids, like, come on, do better. Like, of course your kid, like what kind of advice, your kid's up to bat, what can a parent possibly tell their kid to do better? Yeah. You're not going to motivate them while they're staring down a pitcher. Just support them. You don't have to say anything. Mike Matheny wrote a big letter once before he was coaching the Cardinals. And after he was retired, he was coaching his kids' Little League baseball team. And he wrote a letter to all the parents essentially saying, you need to sit there in the stands and shut up and let us coach these kids. Don't, say, come on, Bobby, like all that stuff is a distraction. Let us do our thing. You're not going to convince your kids to do any better. I had one parent one year who was always, anytime his kid missed the ball or made a bad throw, he's like, come on, and I'll keep saying the phrase do better. That's essentially what their parents are screaming at their kids, like, come on, catch the ball. Of course, your kid is trying to catch the ball. You don't have to scream, catch the ball after you missed it. So this one parent, I said, hey, we're kind of shorthanded. I need you to come out here and help us. I said, the kids are up to bat, so they're practicing hitting and running the bases. So you just play, here's a glove, play first base. And I started hitting balls to this dude until it was no end. And he looked like an idiot because he sucked so bad at baseball. And it only took about 5 minutes for him to understand how this wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Like, he's a grown man. At this point, he's probably 35 years old. And he's yelling at his 10-year-old to catch the ball. Well, you can't catch the ball. So get over here and sit down. Yep. Come on. So parents, it's tough. And I've seen that in kids where they are so scared to death. They get up to bat and they look at the pitcher. And the next thing I do is they look at their parents in the stands. Because they're waiting for the ridicule. They know if I miss this ball that's coming in for me to hit, my parents are going to scream, I'll be scared to death. Yeah. That's a horrible way for your kids to live. Don't be that parent. Don't be the parent that's putting so much pressure on your kid to perform, to be, Albert Pujols out there. He's 10.
Yeah.
Just let him go play.
Yep.
Let him have fun with his buddies. Let him run around and get dirty. Jump you don't. you're not accomplishing anything by trying to coach from the stands. That's why there's coaches. Let them do their job and just support them. When your kid's done, say, hey, we're going Dairy Queen. We're going out to eat. And that's what your kids are wanting. They're just wanting that support. They're not wanting, all the pressure that you put on them, that parents put on kids today to perform to some crazy, crazy level.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things, there's such an importance and emphasis, and it's like I said earlier, the 3 Bs, the ball field, the bedroom, the billfold. We put such an emphasis on, we want our kids to be, and sometimes I think we want them to be successful. And sometimes I think with some parents, I want them to be successful because I wasn't, especially with sports, And I think that comes out in that. And full disclosure, I tend to be the guy that leans a little bit harder on my son, to push him to be a little bit better. But it's always this, there's a balancing act with that. And it's a me and my wife have had conversations about, hey, let's just let him have fun, And a lot of times when I'll push him when we're training, when we're practicing and all that stuff, the game comes, I'm like, son, just have fun.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And you know what? There's a time and place when it's time to get more serious. High school is definitely a time where all of a sudden, now the little kid stuff is over.
Yep.
And we're starting to get, more serious. You can't, if you're going to play high school basketball, there's not any more time to let's just let everybody on the team. You need the best players in your school on the team.
Yep.
Same way with football. This isn't flag football anymore. There's big high school kids with full beards, getting ready to try to murder you on the football field. We can't just let the little bitty kid that out there to do those things. So there's a time when there's a time to get serious, and I'd say that pretty much anything pre-high school, feel free. Let your kids have fun. Let them enjoy. If they want to, and let your kids kind of gauge, how serious they need to be. If they really voice an interest in it, that's great. I'd also say, though, don't let your kids run your life either. As parents, you're the ones making the decision on what your family's going to do for the weekend, And if everybody wants to play basketball, awesome. That's what everybody wants to do. But there's a lot of parents that feel the pressure of the community of whatever sport they're playing, soccer or whatever, where it's like, oh, we've got to go play this tournament, in North Dakota. Your kid's 4.
Right.
Do we really got to go to the tournament? Like, I don't know. At some point, you just be reasonable about it. Some families, that's their thing. Everybody, the whole family loves it. If the crazy dad is dragging everybody against their will to go, that's a problem.
Yeah,
that's a problem. So, but ultimately, the parents need to lead that. Whatever direction you want to go, it's because the parents have decided to do it, not because the kid says, oh, I'm making all the decisions for the family. It shouldn't be the 4-year-old saying, hey, mom and dad, you're paying for me to get into this soccer tournament 5,000 miles from here. I don't know. Maybe, when you're 10 or 12 or whatever, that's, something different. But we got to be careful about who's, leading the family and who's really in charge of the family.
Yes. I think that one of the things that is missing a lot in culture is we do allow the kids to kind of drive the bus. And that is something that I see more and more and more. It's like every parent thinks that every one of their kids should be in 9 different extracurricular activities until the point where it's like, we're not even at home. And it's just, that is dangerous for your family, but it's also teaching your kids a really, really unhealthy thing, because one of the things that over the last, especially couple years, I've tried to emphasize is that my wife's first. There is a pecking order. And for me, my wife is number 1. That's the woman I have to spend the rest of my life with. That's the one that's relationship is so important. And we're kind of getting into the marriage thing, but I think that's something you need to establish for your kids. Your kids need to know, hey, she's the queen.
Yeah.
She is ruling the same as me, and I back her up and she backs me up. And you guys, you're secondary. And that's okay. And you need to learn to be that secondary, because someday you're going to have to be the lead, and you're going to have to do that with your kids.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. So one of the things in culture, I think that we are, and I talked about this briefly in one of our early episodes of the red pill culture or manosphere that they talk about. It's something that's growing, and I think both of us would kind of classify ourselves as kind of conservative Christian men, kind of more traditional in our outlooks of the world. And a lot of what's going on with this is there's a movement on the right. I wouldn't even call it Christian. Some people profess Christianity, and but it's all about what's going wrong, that women have too much control, that feminism has destroyed the ability for men to find a good woman. And so because of that, and I think that there is a little bit of truth in the diagnosis that culture has caused this shift in where we put so much emphasis on the equality or egalitarianism or whatever we want to call it, that we're missing what God's design is. And as a result, the power has shifted, and we're seeing a lot of guys that they're not able to find a good mate. And as a result, the diagnosis may be correct, but the solution is wrong, and that just be selfish. Go out and sleep with all these women, make as much money as you can. Don't settle down. Don't do any of this stuff, because that's not important. But one of the things that is missing in that is that God designed us. He didn't design us to be alone. He didn't design us to be just a bunch of solo men going out and conquering the world without the aspect of having a wife or a mate. Because I think that where men are successful and where men are geared is to be domineering, is to be aggressive, is to be ambitious. And what women do is they calm that ambition. They soften us out to where we don't become these tyrants, in whatever field we're in. Men have a propensity to become tyrants. And I think that really what we need is to find that mate that we can have a family with, that we can share a life with. And the only way we find that is by seeking it in the right places. So looking in your church, looking in the right places, because there are still good women out there as opposed to what is being sold in this movement. And I think that one of the things that I am sorry, I've got this thing in my throat. One of the things that we need to come back to is the fact that God designed us to find a mate, to have a life together. He created Adam, but then he realized that Adam didn't need to be alone. And so he gave him Eve.
And if you want to have a hard time, being a father and leading by example, try it with a spouse that you don't get along with very well. That it's going to be 100 times more difficult. So that the whole fatherhood thing starts with the marriage first. That's where obviously it's going to start. So that's got to be rock solid. That has, the foundation there has to be unbreakable. And if it's and we build that foundation on the Bible, and you find that's what the culture, that's where we should derive the right culture from, is from Scripture. And society today, most people just derive their culture of their relationship just from the world, what they see on TV. And I should just, if I'm looking for a wife, I just need to find the best looking wife. That's all I need to worry about. And all my friends will like me, and I'll have this trophy, and that's the only thing that's important. Well, you'll find out real quick that, that doesn't cover a whole lot of stuff.
No.
You could have the best looking wife on the planet. If she's mean to you and doesn't respect you, you're not going to put up with that.
No.
It won't matter what this person looks like at all. Promise. So it needs to be built on Scripture. And I mean, good grief. I hear, a lot of guys like, I just don't know where to meet somebody. I go to bars and I get on dating apps, and
Problem
sometimes
number one.
I've heard wild stories. I've got friends who met their spouses just, at a bar, just random, and they've been married a long time. So those things, I know those things can work, but I've also heard for every one of those, I hear 10 disasters of how those things didn't work out. And so why not? Why be afraid to go find, hey, I'm going to church. You're a single person. The first person. That should be your first option.
Yeah.
of where to find somebody. And then if you're on a dating app, you could be doing other things too. But I mean, that's the treasure trove of a good starter for your new family is somebody that has some good values that you believe the same way. I'm surprised at how many people in the world meet and it's like, well, what do you believe in? Well, I'm, Jewish. Well, okay, I'm Catholic. Like, okay, I don't know if this is going to work out or not. And people realize that after they've been married.
Right.
If, in that situation, you'd have to figure it out before you got married for sure.
Yeah.
But, the foundation of your relationship should be your faith, what you believe in. And both of you have got to believe the same thing. And if you got that set, then the parenting and the fatherhood is going to be a much easier go. Not that it's super easy. And if for all you families out there to have like 1-year-old, 2-year-old kids and you think things are tough right now, wait till your kids get in high school and they got drama with their friends and drama with boyfriends. And you got to tell them, they can't go out with their friends. They got homework to do. Things are going to explode exponentially when your kids hit that high school time frame with problems like, oh my gosh, the cops just called and said my son or daughter just got caught drinking. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's worse than a kid screaming for 5 minutes because they won't eat their green beans when they're 2. I promise you, it's going to be, it's going to be more stressful. It's going to be more worrisome. It's midnight on a Saturday. I wonder how come my kids aren't home yet. And I hear sirens in town. Like, there's a lot to worry about as your kids get older. But hopefully, we've got a good foundation and faith to help us lead us through that.
Yep. And if you are, little side note, if you are using dating app, make sure you meet the person. You don't want any Manti Te'o type situations. I don't know if you've ever heard the story of the Manti Te'o, the ultimate catfishing. We watched that documentary a couple of months ago, but that was it's mind blowing that there are people out there that will take advantage of people on these dating apps and concoct some crazy stories. But
one of the worst dating app stories I heard was from a guy that I knew from around here. Met a girl online. She was from another country. He flew her here. Who knows how much that cost? Once she got here, she asked him for a ride to go visit another American friend that she had met. And he drove her there, and she got out of the car and went into this person's house and shut the door. And that was the last time he ever saw this person. So,
wow.
Just a word of caution out there. If you met somebody from another country that needs a plane ticket here, you might want to do some vetting.
I had an Air Force buddy once bring a stripper back with him from training, and he married her and adopted her kid, and then she left him. And he paid child support for her. So there are some pretty bad stories out there. Maybe don't date strippers.
I thought my story was bad. I think you one upped me.
Yeah. That's some craziness. But I think that one of the things as we try and round this out, it's we need men to stand up and lead their families, their homes, because I said earlier that men have a propensity to become tyrants if they are not harnessed, if we're not taught to harness the monster. One of the most famous clips from Jordan Peterson was, "Let your boys be monsters, and then teach them how to control it." And I saw some clips the other day of what the advantages of wrestling with your boys are. You teach them that natural aggression, you teach them resilience, you teach them all of this stuff, you teach them boundaries. But I think there's a lot of people that are not willing to take the training wheels off of their kids and let them explore. We talked about that earlier. Is like, let them explore. Let them go get in a little bit of trouble and understand, that that's a part of life. And I think as a part of how we should be as godly fathers is we should be guiding our sons to allow their natural masculine tendencies to come out, but then teach them the lessons of what it means to control it, what it means to actually become a man, that you're not just this wild beast that's out there trying to conquer everything, but you are a godly man that has the ability to do some bad stuff if the time ever comes. I think that being a dangerous man is an important thing, but I think that you have to understand when is the time to unleash the beast and when is the time to keep it in its cage.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to kids and letting them get into a little bit of trouble, one of the main points of that whole scenario is your kids get to see how you respond to that. I remember as a kid, me and a buddy of mine, where we lived right next to the high school in Carterville when I was growing up, and me and a buddy of mine were messing around one day, and we decided we're going to break a window out of the gym of the high school. Like, we just took a little rock and, it was just the red-blooded male. We're going to break a window. So, I threw a couple rocks. He threw a couple. It was just a small window, and we hightailed it out of there. And somehow, of course, my dad finds out about it. And, of course, my dad, pulled the old, sigh up on me. And he's like, so he said, did your buddy, did he throw the first rock or he didn't ask me if I broke the window. He just said, did he throw the first rock or did you? Of course, I ran it out my bus. I said, oh, he did,
Yep. I was just standing there with my halo on.
So I got in trouble, had to pay for the window.
Yep.
My dad didn't, beat me. He didn't, go absolutely nuts, but it was like, I could tell he was disappointed. That's, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed. That's a real thing.
Yep.
You don't want your parents to be disappointed in you, and there's repercussions. Had to pay for that. So you see the response. Your kids get to see what type of response there is, where the guardrails are. They get to see if the punishment is coming from a legit place of love for your kids or if it's just anger. And those things are critical, man. They are very important for your kids to understand how you're going to respond. Are there standards? Are there rules? We live in a society today where there's not very many rules anymore.
Or make your own rules.
Yeah, people can literally just do whatever you want. You want to beat up some cops in New York City? All right, cool. We'll let you go for $0 and never see you again. Or you see clips of kids in school. Like, I've seen so many clips of grade school kids getting up in their teachers' faces and yelling and screaming at them and spitting on them because they know there's no consequences. We cannot live in a society like that. Like, well, we can't touch the kids or we can't. Says who? Like, we just make up these dumb rules on our own, and we've let lawsuits and litigation and all this stuff just scare everybody to death to where we can't do anything. And now it's worse. Getting sued 10 times a day, that's not as bad as the end result we have.
Yep.
It's not. And it's because we've decided no standards anymore. Kids, can do anything they want to do in school. They can do anything they want to do to teachers, and there's nothing teachers can do about it. Zero. That's a bad place for society to be. You're going to see kids lash out. We see it in law enforcement. We see kids that know they're not going to get in trouble do the same thing over and over and over again, especially juveniles. They know there's not a whole lot we can do to them, so they're even more motivated to go out and shoot up their buddy's house or their enemy's house. Like, so what? If I probably won't get caught, and if I do, I'll be back home tonight, and nothing's really going to happen. And so the result of not having consequences and not having standards is we're sliding downhill in a hurry. And I've talked about this before. I don't know if we're coming back from this. I hope, pray that we are. Pray that we have this awakening and this uprising of men and families that want to set the standard again, and that turns things around. We'll see.
Yes. I think one of the things, my wife, who is a school teacher, and it's definitely, I could not be a school teacher. The story she tells me, I'm just like, nope. That lasted about 2 hours before I slammed the kid's head in the locker for being disrespectful. And it's just like, wow. And high school on top of that. So it's these kids are peak, know how to get away with everything. But I think that one of the things that's really, really hard to deal with is the fact that, we see this happening in society. We see all of this stuff going on, and it's like you see a freight train coming down and you're on the tracks and you're like, how do I get off of it? But you're stuck to the tracks. But I do think that there is signs of life, and to kind of talk about some things positive that my wife has shared with me here recently. She said that she does this thing where she takes a survey of her students of things that they want to improve over the school year. And she said that the vast majority of them were saying, I want to get closer to God. And that's something that's awesome. Like, man, that is a little glimmer of hope in what we see a lot of hopelessness. in our world. And I think that to a certain extent, when you see despair and you see pain all over the place, a lot of people are like, you know what? There is an answer. And I think a lot of people know that the answer is God.
And that's what we keep talking about, is I think a lot of people feel that way, and there's so much pressure to not say it. And it's just been pressed down for so long. And now I'm hoping and praying that, you know what, people aren't afraid, or they're getting more bold with that. You know, even back, you know, I remember going back to my high school days here again. Every year when the yearbook came out, there was always like questions like, what was your favorite movie, or your favorite, car, or whatever. And there was always a question, your favorite book. And every year, all the high school students always put the Bible.
Yeah.
Like, and I thought that was kind of shocking to me. Like, really, like all these high school kids say their favorite book is the Bible. But looking back, and I'm like, well, that's probably, is the majority. That probably is how most people feel. But there's all this pressure. Oh, you can't say that. You'll be, a wussy or a nerd or something if you say something like that. But I think, hopefully we're starting to see people that aren't afraid to say what they believe in. And the next thing you know, the next person raises their hand. Yeah, I believe the same way. And hopefully, we can start to have this uprising and people join together, and everybody voices their opinions and believes, like, you know what, we're going to stand up for what we believe in. We're going to stand up for what's right. And we're going to have rules and standards of life, and we're going to demand that. We're not just going to sit back anymore. And hopefully we'll see that big tsunami start to build.
Yep. Act like you believe.
Absolutely.
There's something. Somebody said that somewhere.
We should write that down.
Yeah, we should. And I think I want to kind of end it with this concept of discipleship, because as fathers with children, we are discipling our children. We're teaching them. We're training them. And going back to kind of where I started with Vodi Bakum, in that same sermon, he talked about the instant his son turned 13. He was in complete control of teaching him how to become a man. He said, I was discipling him. He went on the road with me. He was with me everywhere, watching my every move. I was teaching him all of the valuable lessons. And the reality is, some of us may not be able to do that. But I do think that there is an important nugget of truth there that we should be, especially in those formative years. I think that the roles of parents are important. A mother is so important to an infant and a toddler and a child that's very young, because she nurtures and she teaches them, what love feels like, and how to be comforted and all of this stuff. And I think once children get into their teenagers, especially boys, that's when they need dad. They need dad. Okay, dad, I don't know what's coming down the road. This next 5-6 years, a lot of changes are going to happen with me and my body and my mind and everything. And I need you to teach me and blaze the trail. Come alongside me and disciple me and show me. That is something that I think is sorely lacking. And we need men to stand up and do those things and take their kids under their wings and teach them how to be men and women of God.
Yeah, one of the things I did with, I look back on raising my 3 boys, and one of the things I regret is I wish, and they all turned out awesome, but I wish I would have spent more time with them developing in more detail skills. We would go out and, own a gun range, for crying out loud. So we go shooting every once in a while, or I never really brought them into the fold of like firearms as self-defense. Like I didn't, on one hand, I felt like, well, I don't want to be the dad that forces my kids into the hobby that I love just because, well, that's my thing, and I'm going to teach them how to do that. But when it comes to things like self-defense and being proficient with a gun and, being able to camp and all those things, that, there should be a list. There should be a task list of some things you, at the very least, you go over with your kids. It doesn't mean you got to take your kid 3 times a week to the gun range for 4 years, but there should be some things that you have some talks about, like, hey, we're going to go camping and we're going to put up a tent, and you're going to learn how to do this, and you're going to learn how to make a campfire. We're going to learn how to cook some stuff. We're going to learn how to shoot a gun. We're going to learn how to, change the spark plugs in your car and change your oil. We're going to learn to do these things. One of the coolest things I did with my youngest son, Aaron, before he went off to college is, he had like a 2000 Ford Ranger, his very first vehicle that he bought with his own money, and radiator went out on it. It was leaking all over the place. And we're sitting there looking at it one day. I'm not a mechanic by any means, but I thought to myself, it cannot, honest to God, be that hard to change a radiator in a Ford Ranger. So get on YouTube. Hey, let's look it up. Let's order the radiator. We got it. And we together changed the radiator in his truck. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
This is cool. It's teaching kids, like, listen, here's a problem. Let's, how are we going to fix this? Have you ever changed a radiator? Nope, I haven't either. So how do we figure this out? Well, let's, do some research, figure out what we need to do. Buy some. In worst case scenario, we tear it up and we got to have it towed and have a mechanic fix it.
Yeah.
Which is what most people do anyway. So so what? Let's give it a shot. So doing those things with your kids is critical, and it's enjoyable. It's fun. You're making memories with your kids. I'm out there taking pictures of my son working on. I'm like, this is cool. These are things that you're not ever gonna forget either. So you're building those memories and building that bond, and that's how we lead as fathers.
Yep. And that's some of my fondest memories of my late father are when I would be faced with something that I couldn't necessarily handle on my own. Hey, Dad, this broke. I don't know what to do. And I mean, my dad was literally one of those guys. If you called him and you said you needed help, it was like 15 minutes and he was showing up with his tool belt on, and we were figuring the problem out. And that's something that I think is so important, to be there for your kids, to give them that rite of passage, because that's really what that is. All of these little details, all of these little lessons that you learn either together or you teach.
Yeah.
They're rites of passage to manhood, to womanhood, that only a father can give their kids.
Yeah.
Mothers can, to a certain extent, help with that, but they're not really equipped for it. It takes a dad to be engaged to do those things and to give their children the rites of passage to becoming adults.
There's so many teachable moments. My first two, my oldest kids, I was kind of like leading by example, and they'd watch me, doing things around the house or working on cars or that type of thing. And when my youngest son, when he started high school, my oldest kids were out of high school, so it was just us and Aaron. And I thought, well, I got 4 years of high school with him, and I thought, anytime there's any issue that, a house repair that needs to be done, plumbing or mechanical, anything that I'm going to work on, I'm calling him to where I'm at. I want you to watch what I'm doing. I want you to watch how we work through this process of figuring something out, how to fix things. And it could be something as minor as, spray painting a sign in the yard. Like, okay, you need to teach your kids how to use a spray paint can. Mm-hmm. Somebody's got to teach your kids how to paint stuff. And the little things that is sometimes we take for granted, because nobody taught me how to build a deck or to wire a house or to put, whatever. I was kind of a visual learner, and I paid attention to a lot of stuff, and I did research on my own. I kind of figured things out on my own. But a lot of kids are busy these days, and there's not a whole lot of opportunities. So as a parent, as a dad, anytime you find yourself working on a project, putting together a desk, fixing a thing, working on something, and your kid's upstairs watching TV, like, hey man, come on down here. We got something to do.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that to just make them do it. It's a teaching moment, and it's a bonding moment. And there's 10 of those every single day that happen. There's so many things to talk about, just from, it could be washing the windshield of your car at the gas station. There's a way to do that really well. There's a way to suck at doing that. And some kids pay attention and can just see somebody do it and got it figured out. Other times you got to teach, like, here's how this works. So don't miss those opportunities to one-on-one teach your kids.
Yep. What is it? You get like 950, 960 weekends with your kids until they're 18.
Yeah.
Now 900, that sounds like a big number. It's really not.
Yeah.
I'm already over halfway through it, man, with my oldest. And so don't squander those moments.
And I think one of the things I squandered with my kids were the moments to get more into the Bible on the faith side. We went to church. I just, for years as a parent, I just assumed that, well, all that stuff will soak in, and I'm not really a Bible expert, and I'm not really good at teaching the Bible, and so I didn't really feel comfortable in that space very much. But now looking back, I wish I would have just made myself like, well, how come you're not comfortable? Because you're not any good at it. Well, why not? Because you haven't spent any time at it. So, it's one of those things where, you know what? Maybe I need to get into this. I need to get into some devotionals. I need to share this information, with my kids. Just simple stuff like why do I even believe the Bible's real? That might be a good place to start.
Yeah.
Because your kids are going to get it in high school. Like, oh, you're a Jesus freak. You believe all this fairy tales of. They need to know, like, are these kids right? Or do I really know the truth about the word and kind of, and so, aside from working on cars and doing all those things, that's probably where we need to start.
Oh yeah.
Is with that. That should be the most important thing, because you don't want your kids to fall away from the faith once they get into high school or go away to college. I'm like, well, my parents didn't really care about it, so why should I?
Yeah.
We don't want that happening. So do not neglect that side of it.
Yep. The Bible says, train a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. So those building blocks are set at a very young age. And I think even just taking your kids to church is a step. That's absolutely a step. And honestly, that's where we've been at times. And my wife, bless her, I love her dearly, because she's the one that's like, hey, I know we've been focused a lot on sports here lately. Let's make sure that we're getting the Bible still in, and let's make sure. So there's times where I can get hyper focused on this one thing. And as men, we tend to do that. We get focused on this new thing that we're learning, or this project that we've got going on, and we tend to lose a lot of the peripheral things. And that's what wives and good godly wives are so important, is because they can kind of pull our focus, like, hey, don't forget this part too. And I think that is a part that we absolutely should forget.
Probably in the last 8 or 10 months or so, with me and my wife, we've talked about it a lot, and it's real easy on Sundays to get wrapped up in all kinds of other stuff going on. And we've tried to move more towards, treating it like a Sabbath. It is one of the 10 commandments, if in case you have forgotten, is to keep the Sabbath. Like, well, okay. So what does that mean? We're going to take one of our days off and just sit around and do nothing? Like, well, not exactly, but you shouldn't be so filled with all kinds of work and jobs and chores that we're so busy that, we can't be a family, anymore. So we've really tried to focus more in the last year of trying to set aside more time on Sundays. Like, let's just be a family. Let's hang out with each other, and we can, it doesn't mean we just sit there and stare at the wall, but it means we are together as a family, and we're not engaged as much as in a certain thing. We're just enjoying each other's company and relaxing and not trying to, so that's code for don't mow the yard for 5 hours. That's code for, we're not painting the house for 4 hours. We're trying to just do things together as a family.
Yep. Well, and I think that one of the big things that we think of when we hear that commandment is, we think, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. It doesn't say keep the Sabbath lazy. It says keep it holy. So I think that what that means is keep it Christ-centered, focused on the things that matter. Your family matters. So focus on your family in that day. Whatever that looks like. Have that time to bond together and to put all of the things outside the world away and say, okay,
so it doesn't mean you can't go to your kid's baseball game on a Sunday, but it means you probably shouldn't get your laptop out and try and, do 15 TPS reports.
With the new cover sheets.
Yeah, absolutely. Terry Tate is going to make you put cover sheets on there. But, so be present. Be, with your family and focus on that.
Yep. Well, I think that this has been a phenomenal conversation, and I would like to close out by leaving a little word of encouragement for the men out there who maybe you've been that passive, or maybe you've been that tyrant in your family, And I want to call you guys to be engaged, because it's going to take a whole lot of us stepping up to the plate and focusing on leading our families well, focusing on following Christ and our families following us as we follow Christ. And I think that is the most important thing to turn culture around, to change the outlook of what we're looking at, and that freight train coming down the tracks. I think that we have a duty and a commission from God to not be lazy, to not be passive, but to take that by the horns and lead our families well. So I want to leave you guys with that, and we thank you guys, all of you guys that have been tuning in on a regular basis. We are beyond overjoyed that you guys continue to consume our content, and we've got a lot more on the way. And I hope that you guys will come out to some of our trainings that are coming up, because we're going to do it a little bit different than what we do on a normal, tactical training. We're going to infuse some of this stuff, some of these lessons, some of these things that matter in these situations. Don't forget to follow our social medias, and we'll see you guys next time. Until then, carry Jesus wherever you go and act like you believe. Have a good one, guys.